Hey rowers. Today I want to have a quick little talk just about foot stretcher height. It's a pretty small aspect, or at least it seems that way, but like with a lot of things when it comes to rowing, it actually impacts a fair amount of your stroke. The basics of where you want to set this foot stretcher are that you want the strap here going across the lowest lace of your shoe, approximately. Basically, you want the strap across the top of the ball of your foot. So when you step down and go up towards your toe, that ball of your foot right at the bottom, that's where you want the strap going as sort of the basic level. But obviously, you can raise and lower that foot stretcher. And so I want to look into what happens when you do that raising and lowering. So there's three basic things that changes. The first one is as you go up and move that foot stretcher up, the strap moves back towards your ankle. And what that does, so if I've got the foot stretcher way up here, there we go, is that limits how much you can lift your heel up because it's holding your foot down closer to your heel. And that can be really useful for some people who have a habit of over-compressing, that force feedback keeping you from lifting your heel can prevent you from compressing too far at the front end. If your heel's held down, that makes it more likely that you'll only come up to that vertical shin full compression location and not go past that. The second thing that it does, starting to get a little more complicated, is that the foot stretcher moving up actually changes the angle at which your entire leg is connecting with your hip. So if you sort of think about it to an extreme degree, if you moved a foot stretcher all the way up here, now your leg angle to your hip is a much sharper angle. So if you try to come forward, get that hip rotation forward to get that forward body angle, because like I always say, hinge through the hips, it's a lot harder when your feet are up really high. Whereas if your feet are down really low, like say it's all the way down on the ground, then you have a lot of room to get that forward hip lean. And so for a person who, especially someone who has a large emphasis on the hip rotation, the body swing aspect of your stroke, moving the foot stretcher down will allow you to get further forward and get more of that hip swing. The third thing that moving the foot stretcher does is it gives you either more or less of a horizontal push. So when you take the stroke, if the foot stretcher is up higher, so say my feet were all the way up here, that would mean I'm pushing basically straight back. All the force I'm putting into the stroke is just moving my seat straight back. If my foot stretcher were really low, again, exaggerated, say it's on the ground, then when I push, I'm pushing back, but I'm also pushing up. And so if you ever hear about people pushing so hard they jump off the seat, that's because there is a certain degree of up push to your drive, because typically your feet are a little bit lower than where you're sitting. And so the lower down you go, the more sort of, I guess you could say wasted energy, but the more sort of alternate energy there is going into your drive of pushing up as opposed to pushing back. So the natural inclination is to think that as you go down lower, you're actually having a less efficient drive because you're sort of wasting energy pushing up as opposed to pushing straight back. However, you have to factor in that hip swing, which is a huge component of the stroke. For one thing, because the body swing is giving you about 30%, 20 to 30% of your power, and that changes depending on how you're built, how you take the stroke. So if you don't have as much body swing, you're losing a lot of that power. But another large component of that is, let me get my feet stretchers back to normal. Another large component of that is the fact that, drop this one more. is the fact that when you get that forward swing, a big reason to get the forward swing is that having forward body angle, having your chest ahead of your hips, allows you to get suspension off of the handle as you press back. You can actually do a drill if you have someone else to help you out, where someone can hold on to the handle, stand behind the rower, and sort of hold on to the middle of the handle here and prevent you from pulling back. And then you can sit at the front, and if you have good suspension, if you're sitting forward, you can actually push with your feet and lift your entire butt up off the handle or off the seat because you're hanging off the handle. But if you try that again when you're sitting straight up, you'll find that that's pretty much impossible because you can't activate the same muscles. You can't get the connection through the core when you're sitting straight up that you can when you're hinged forward. So if you move your seat up or your foot stretchers too high and prevent yourself from getting that forward swing, that also prevents you from getting suspension off the handle, which lowers the amount or makes you slower on the rower. So as to where you should put your foot stretchers, again, the basic system is just to put them with the strap going across the ball of your foot. But you can fiddle around with that and find what works best for you. One way to think about it is that if you have a really long torso relative to your leg length, you might want to try and take extra advantage of that body swing. And so you might actually move your foot stretchers a little lower. And as long as you don't go too far forward and over compress, because moving the foot stretchers lower will make it more likely for you to over compress because there's not as much force feedback on the top of your foot reminding you not to lift your heel way too high. So as long as you prevent yourself from doing that, moving your foot stretchers down will let you get a little further forward and take even more advantage of the body swing. So that's if you have a long torso, shorter legs, and you really want to get as much out of the body swing as possible. On the other hand, if you have really long legs, I have pretty long legs relative to my torso, maybe you want to move it up an extra notch. And this actually is where I normally keep mine. This is one notch higher than someone who is my size would typically have their foot stretchers. And that's because I want to have a slightly more horizontal drive. And also, like I've said in previous videos, have a habit of overcompressing. And so having my foot stretchers up a little higher gives me that little bit of extra feedback on the top of my foot to remind me not to compress too far. So that's how I do it. Another thing is you might want to change the foot stretcher position a little bit between sprinting versus longer steady state pieces. So for a sprint type of workout, you may want to move your foot stretchers up a little bit so that you have that horizontal component, if that's what works better for you. But yeah, that's pretty much how foot stretchers affect the rowing. So keep that in mind, maybe play with it, do one workout with the foot stretchers at one height, move them up to another height for the next workout, keep track of your splits relative to how intense it felt, and find which foot stretcher height gives you the best results. Great. Have a good one. Row on. Row strong.